On February 18th, general mobilization began, and the university threatened us, saying we had to show up to the enlistment office. Many students ended up getting mobilized. The police stopped me often. I had to make excuses as to why I didn't have a Russian passport. There were 2 Russian Federal Security Service guys there. They said, "Take off your clothes, you must have satanic tattoos." The situation intensified. It was scary, so I wanted to leave and never return.
Imagine spending your entire childhood in Russian occupation, and then leaving everything behind for Ukraine-controlled territories. 21-year-old Dmytro Kruk from Russian-occupied Khrestivka in the Donetsk Oblast did exactly that. Twice.
So, how did the occupation begin in 2014? You were 9 years old at the time, you were still a fairly young child, so at that age you probably couldn't really understand what was happening around you. Were there any signs that something had changed?
Well, when the fighting for the city began, it was probably the most notable sign of occupation. They tried to liberate the city, but it didn't work. We had no electricity for 3 months. We lived in the basement. We only went home to get some food or something, and it was different then. We had no internet connection. We got all our news either from TV, but only when we had electricity, or from people we knew. Well, that probably also influenced how the occupation unfolded. If there had been mobile internet back then, like now, with TikTok and Telegram, it would have been different. But we were occupied, and we were given information by those who occupied us.
Tell us some of your childhood memories before the occupation, if you have any. What was life like in the city? What did you do?
I remember that everyone's father worked in a mine. After the occupation, it wasn't the case because the mines were closing. We have a big mine in the city. People used to come to work there from other cities in Donetsk Oblast, such as Khrestivka, Kyiv. They would arrive by bus. So there were a lot of miners in the city, and it was especially obvious on Miners' Day, on holidays like that, when the whole city would go out. And after 2014, that wasn't the case anymore. Until 2022, it continued in some form, but after 2022, it stopped. I don't know if anyone works at that mine now.
Hasn't it closed yet?
It seems not. In 2022, there was a mobilization there. Half of the miners were mobilized.
And at what age did you realize that your city, which had been part of another state, Ukraine, had fallen under Russian occupation? When did you realize that your city had transitioned from one regime to another?
It's hard to say. I probably first thought about it in 2016. My friend and I were walking outside in the winter. I was still listening to Yarmak before the full-scale invasion. I had many of his songs. In 2016 and 2015, I listened to the song called 22 about the events on the Maidan, and he told me to stop it because it was dangerous. And that's when I realized it for the first time. This friend died in 2024. He went to fight for Russia.
Can you recall how the full-scale invasion began for you? How did you find out about it? Did you notice bigger military presence?
My friend and I left an agricultural cooperative when a very large column of tanks started driving past. They were very loud. I don't remember what day it was. It was in February, maybe a week before the full-scale invasion. The whole city could hear the convoy of this equipment. It was very loud. And then my friend's mother, who worked in the local prosecutor's office, told me that something would happen, that it was better to leave. On February 18th, general mobilization began, and the university threatened us, saying we had to show up to the enlistment office, that our data was all there and we would be found anyway. That's what our dean wrote to us. Mobilization applied to everyone from 18 to 60 or maybe 55 years old.
Were you already 18 at that time?
I was 17, I was a little lucky, but all my university peers who were 18 received draft notices. They all had to go to the enlistment office and go to war.
Do you know how many people actually went?
From our group, maybe 5, maybe 20. I don't really remember, but many. Many students ended up getting mobilized. Some were caught on the streets. There was no deferral. If you are 18, it doesn't matter if you study or not. The university staff wrote to us that the draft notice arrived and that we had to pick it up. They even wrote in our chat that they keep track of who attends classes and who doesn't, so that they could see who had left and who could still be mobilized. They threatened us, as I said.
Were you afraid that you would also soon receive a draft notice, or that your friends would be mobilized and they could die? Did you think about that at that moment?
Luckily, almost none of my friends were 18 at the time.
And how did you discuss it among yourselves? Young guys were getting draft notices. Did you realize that the same thing could happen to you in a year?
Well, everyone said it was wrong, but then everyone quickly forgot about it. There were even Ukrainian videos with our peers who had been taken captive. There was some kind of broadcast, and they were sharing where they were from and how they had been captured. My friends constantly justified Russia. After 2022, after the full-scale invasion, they all sided with Russia. I was the only one who wasn't. They probably felt the power of Russia, that it could protect us. They all started supporting Russia, even though before that they were more neutral, and they justified any of Russia's actions, including the mobilization. No matter how much you argued, they still didn't see anything wrong there.
So, were you alone in your pro-Ukrainian views, or did you have any other friends or anyone else with whom you could share your views? Or did you also openly tell your pro-Russian friends that you supported Ukraine?
Yes, they all knew.
And how did they feel about it?
They judged me, but also tried to ignore it. As a joke, they would constantly call me a kokol or something else.
Do I understand correctly that after the full-scale invasion, forced passportization began on a bigger scale? Did you have to get it?
Yes. The Donetsk People's Republic passportization was also forced, because anyone who had property, anyone who wanted to study or work, needed a DPR passport. And that's how I got a DPR passport, because I was told that I wouldn't be allowed to graduate from school without it. After 2022, forced Russian passportization began. Without a Russian passport, you couldn't do anything at all. You couldn't study, get a driver's license, buy an apartment, or get your car re-registered. You couldn't do anything without a Russian passport. It didn't matter whether you had a DPR or a Ukrainian one. You needed a Russian one.
Did you have to get it? Or did you somehow avoid it?
No, I didn't.
How did you receive all the services?
I didn't. At the beginning of 2023, I got a call from the driving school. I was supposed to study there to get a driver's license. And they told me that if I didn't have a Russian passport, I wouldn't be allowed to take the test. I said okay, and that was it. Although it was interesting that I called Russian driving schools in the Rostov region, even far away in Kamchatka and elsewhere, and they said that you can get a driver's license with a DPR passport. That's what the forced passportization was about. In Russia you can get services with a DPR passport, but in the DPR you can't, only with a Russian one.
If you want to hear more interviews like this, please consider joining our community and becoming our member. Your support means a lot for us.
You grew up under occupation. There were many people around you who, well, I understand that few people were pro-Ukrainian, many who took a neutral position, some were pro-Russian. You said that there was no one pro-Ukrainian in your circle. How did you manage to form your own identity in this environment where you grew up from a young age, not around people who spoke Ukrainian and so on?
In 2019, I had some friends who were interested in politics. I had never even thought about it, and I just became interested to somehow fit into the group. I started watching different videos. Then, in 2019, in a V-contacted group, I wrote a comment under some pro-Russian post, after which a guy from Luhansk sent me a private message. He said that it was better not to write such things there, that it was dangerous. We started communicating. He also supported Ukraine, and he also helped me because he knew more than I did then, and he told me what had actually happened.
About what exactly?
About the war, how it started. Because before that, my understanding of the war was that, as they explained to us, we wanted to secede, and Ukraine started to bomb us, flying helicopters and attacking civilians.
So, when the full-scale invasion began, was it any kind of surprise to you? How did you react to it?
I was shocked when I woke up in the morning. The news back then was that Russian troops had landed in Odessa and Kharkiv. Mariupol had already been taken, and that was just on February 24th.
And at what point did you realize that it was better for you to leave the occupation? When did you first have thoughts about leaving at all?
When I found out that it was possible to do this, that I could leave,
What year was this?
in 2022, I left for Germany. I was there for a month, and then I went home, back to the occupation,
Why did you decide that?
because I didn't like it in Germany. I was alone there and I wasn't comfortable there. There was no one there and there wasn't even internet to do anything online. So I just lay there all day, staring at the ceiling.
Did you live in a refugee camp?
Yes, we were placed in a kindergarten. In a room of approximately this size, there were 30 bunk beds. And so I went back home. By then, it was already clear that the Russian army would not capture Ukraine. And then there were even hopes for a counter-offensive, that they would liberate my home, but there would be no one there to welcome them, and I decided to go. It was December 2022. I came back and saw that it had gotten much worse there. I didn't want to get a Russian passport. Whenever the police stopped me, they always asked for my passport. If you don't have a passport, they take you to a police station. The police stopped me often. I had to make excuses as to why I didn't have a Russian passport. I had to say that I was afraid of losing it, so I didn't carry it with me. We didn't really have jobs in the city after the initial occupation, and after the full-scale invasion, it got even worse. So the prospects for staying there were unclear.
So you didn't see any prospects for yourself there?
I didn't. It was impossible to study in Donetsk because it was under attack at that time. And in general, the situation intensified. It was scary. Fighter jets were constantly flying over our house in the morning. I would constantly wake up to the sound of an approaching fighter jet. In addition, threats started coming in constantly from different people.
To you personally, because of your pro-Ukrainian posts?
Because of my post, my opinion, because I have never really hidden it.
Why did you decide to leave the occupation for the second time? Not to Germany, but to Ukrainian-controlled territory this time?
I understood that it was getting worse and worse there, harder and harder. And it was scary to just stay there. So I wanted to leave and never return. And because there was no work in our city, I left for Russia. I worked in a restaurant in Kabardinka. And I decided to get a tattoo with Ukraine's coat of arms. I went to Novorossiysk and I got a tattoo. The idea was that it would stop me from returning after I leave again. Because when I was there, an enlistment office called me and said that I had to show up as soon as I got a Russian passport. And I didn't want to. And so I wanted to be sure that if I want to come back to the occupation again, I won't be able to because of this tattoo.
They wouldn't let you back in because you wouldn't pass filtration?
Maybe I could pass filtration.
Do you think you could somehow hide the tattoo?
Well, when I left, I did hide it, and maybe if I came back, I would have hidden it again. But I just didn't want to come back again. But I understood that I could have such thoughts about returning because it was very difficult in Germany.
Were you afraid that life in Ukrainian-controlled territory would be difficult too?
I didn't know how to get here because I didn't have a place to live here. And I didn't know where to go. I knew that I could come to Germany, they would give me some kind of housing, some kind of assistance. In Ukraine, I wasn't sure, so I decided to leave. I sold the motorcycles I had there, and I didn't tell anyone that I was leaving.
Neither friends nor family?
No, to no one. I left through Mariupol. I saw Mariupol as it was in 2023. There was a lot of destruction there. I saw they had built something there, but it was a separate neighborhood with new houses that stood against the background of the houses they had destroyed. I went through Russia and then to Latvia, and at the Russian customs, on the border with Latvia, I had to go through filtration. I was taken to a room that could only be opened with a keycard. There were 2 Russian Federal Security Service guys there. They saw my ring. I had a ring with a pentagram on it, which was given to me in Germany. They said I was a Satanist. We should cut off your finger. Why do you wear it? They said, take off your clothes, you must have satanic tattoos. It was already cold then, I was wearing a jacket. I said I couldn't undress because it was cold, and I started showing them that I didn't have any tattoos, although I already had that tattoo then.
Did they let you go? Well, they probably interrogated you more, right?
Yes. They started asking me about who I was talking to, where I was going, if I had any acquaintances or relatives in the armed forces of Ukraine. They had a taser on the table. They started turning it on in front of me. They said I must have pro-Ukrainian videos on social media and told me to log in. I explained to them that I couldn't, and they seemed to believe me. Then they gave me a piece of paper saying that I support the actions of the Russian Federation and Vladimir Putin regarding the demilitarization and deoccupation of Ukraine. I do not support the actions of the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and pledge to transfer the coordinates of the armed forces of Ukraine and the security service of Ukraine to the Russian special services. I signed this paper.
Because otherwise they wouldn't have let you go.
Probably not. I signed this paper. They told me to read it out loud. They turned on the camera. I read it all out loud on camera. And they said, if we see you speaking poorly about Russia, we will send this video to Azov, and they are sick, and they will cut off your head. That was the whole filtration. They also offered me to treat the Latvian border guards with some cupcakes with poison, or drive a tank into the Latvian checkpoint, and so I left for Germany. It was September 2023. I arrived. At first everything was fine, and then I started to feel down again in Germany. I didn't want to stay there. I was thinking about going to Ukraine. I wrote to various organizations because they said they were providing housing, but it seemed like they were only providing housing to people who had been evacuated from frontline areas, and if I were to come, I didn't know where to apply.
The second time you were in Germany, the second time you thought about returning home, but because you had a tattoo, you were like...
That's what I did it for.
So you wouldn't go back?
And I didn't.
How long did you live in Germany the second time?
From September 2023 to December 2025.
That's quite long. At what point did you decide to go to Ukraine? When did you have this opportunity?
I had nowhere to go in November or even September 2025. I met a guy who was from Donetsk. He offered me to live with him for some time, so I packed my things, and a week later I was in Ukraine.
So you just lacked someone who could help you at first?
So that I could come and stay with someone, because I still had to find a job. It was very difficult with housing because I didn't know where to turn. And I learned about most of the services that provide assistance to Ukrainians when I was already in Ukraine.
And after you left and ended up in Germany, then in Ukraine, did your perception change? Or did you, in principle, when you lived under occupation, assess everything quite soberly and nothing changed for you?
While living under occupation, I thought things weren't that bad there, that it was still possible to live there. When I left, I realized that it was no longer possible.
What ideas or stereotypes did you have or hear about life in Ukrainian-controlled territory?
The first thing was attacks. I thought it would be like it was for us in 2014, when you sit in the basement and hear, well, it's also scary, but not as scary, I guess.
Not in the basement all the time?
Yes.
Only at night?
Even when the attacks are intense, you go to a shelter at night, then get up in the morning and come out. Not a big deal. But that's how it is perceived, that there are attacks every day here. Information about attacks here reaches them only several days later. People don't write to me on the day of the attack.
People from the occupied territory?
Yes. Everything is banned there. Telegram doesn't work there anymore. Instagram doesn't work. TikTok almost doesn't work either.
Tell us more about your return to Ukrainian territory. What were your first days like when you arrived?
I was in Irpin at first, but I arrived in Kyiv on the first day in Ukraine. It was a little scary, just because that's what it's like when you first arrive somewhere after having lived elsewhere for a long time. I was trembling a bit, but I was very happy. It was winter. I went for a walk alone. My phone was dead, so I wanted to go to this point of invincibility, but there was no power there, so I went home. I quickly found friends, met many people, as I had imagined. I wanted to meet many people whom I had only seen on the internet, and I did.
With the recent news that Ukraine has more and more capabilities to strike military targets in the occupied territories, and more drones are now flying in the sky, have you heard about this? Have the residents complained to you?
I think it started at the end of 2024. They started telling me that a drone could fly over the city. And the last time we had something flying over the city was in 2015. And now drones fly often, but at least people can still feel safe there, because a drone won't fly into a high-rise building.
And how do you generally feel when you see the news from Kyiv that military targets are struck in Donetsk Oblast on a near daily basis?
I'm glad.
Would you still like your home, where you were born, to be under Ukrainian control?
Yes, who wouldn't?
Do you plan to stay in Kyiv in the future?
Yes, I really like it here.
What do you like the most?
That there are many opportunities, more than in Donetsk and more than in Germany, that's for sure.
В Німеччині 100%.
If you made it to the end of this video, you are probably someone who is interested in better understanding Ukraine and the region. There are over 34,000 people like you in the Kyiv independent community, and you can join them too. We'd love to have you there. Link is in the description below.